been 25 years since South Africa broke away from apartheid, a system premised on racial segregation, the effects of which today remains pervasive. After the apartheid, when South Africa received its first black president, race was already an issue, especially when it came to who and what race would be treated with fairness. They call it the country of Rainbow Nation, but does this Rainbow Nation really live up to its name?
Welcome to Democracy in Action. Tonight we talk race and nationalism. It became a key feature in the lead up to the election, during and potentially even post-election. Notwithstanding, we find there are still pockets of racism, evidently through spatial planning, but also individuals that, well, clearly use the K-word and justify it. So where is South Africa in terms of race and nationalism? And to what extent does it inform, be it government delivery and how we see one another? In studio with me, I have student activist and political activist and academic. He is Chumani Maxwele. Also with me is Fadiel. He is from the Gatvol Captonian movement. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Democracy in Action.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening to you and your listeners.
I'd like to start off with you, Chumani. It's a very tricky subject, racism, because we seem to understand it purely through me calling you the K-word potentially, but it's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the idea of racism in a South African context, it's more deeper than the symbolic name calling, but the core of it is the structural component of it, which most of the time is not seen. But you can feel it, you can experience it. As you, if you walk in Stellenbosch University, for example, you won't see that there's no one in today's South Africa who's gonna directly call you a kafir or whatever. But the moment you enter there, you'll experience that in fact, you're not belonging to the university, or you are being rejected. Or, for example, if you walk in Camps Bay, South Africa, if you walk in Camps Bay, you just walking there, you will feel that you don't belong there. Therefore, you can say that there is no one who's calling you any derogative word, but the experience you are having, the association with the people around you or the community around you, it tells you that you don't belong here. That means, therefore, Camps Bay and Stellenbosch University is still in the apartheid era by terms of a structural experience.
Yeah.
And for me, that is why the notion of racism and nationalism is a very broad to that level.
Well, we're going to get a bit later into how we break down, these constructs, but maybe just a preemptive one in terms of how we break it down. Do we do so by slaughtering a sheep on Clifton?
Well, partly. Partly. Well, you see, part of our claim of existence is in spaces that we know that they were spatially planned not for us, deliberately. It's then for us to say, look, as young activists in South Africa who are trying to reconstruct a nation, trying to reconstruct our nationhood for that matter, is to say, how do we almost invade the space that we believe is our space, but spatially against us.
No, I get that. So maybe not put up a shack there, but how do you say that, given that if you go to Clifton today, you won't be stopped. You will be allowed to go there, because previously the very archaic understanding of apartheid was that, as a black person, 20, let's say 30 years ago, you would not have been allowed to walk on Clifton and Camps Bay. Right now, today, you are allowed to do so. So does it meet the criteria of racism?
Well, I mean, the artificiality of just walking in itself has limitations. Therefore, we have a responsibility to say, look, we did not fight for freedom, or our parents did not fight for freedom just for us to walk. It is our responsibility if our government does not do it, because our government have power to break down special planning in our city. By doing what? By building social houses in Camps Bay. Our government have a land. But for the past 25 years, our government have not been able to implement that policy and that power to say, look, let me go and build social houses for our people who are already living in Camps Bay through domestic workers, gardeners, landscapers who belong there, who are staying there. But because of they cannot afford to own it. But we say we cannot afford to own Camps Bay or stay in Camps Bay in commercial basis, but politically there must be a plan. Hence I'm saying, as activists outside the state, we have a responsibility to say, look, if the state cannot do it for us, we must do it ourselves. Hence the political act of slaughtering a sheep in Camps Bay is part of reclaiming our own city, our own spaces. Without us doing that, we will be frustrated. I think part of doing that is to also remind government that government, you've got a responsibility and you can do this thing. And by doing this thing, you can really reimagine our city, because we cannot have a nationhood in this country while we have Constantia, Rondebosch, Camps Bay as a reserves of white people, as it was the case during apartheid. As it stands now, it's a reserve of white people.
Let's bring in Fadiel from the Gatvol Captonian movement, largely regarded as a coloured movement. In fact, some even would say it's a nationalist movement, and that's what we're talking about today. What is your understanding of racism? Is it a black and white issue?
No. Racism comes in all forms, man. Racism comes in religious issues, becomes a colour issue, becomes a cultural issue. I just want to get you off the bat that Gatvol Captonian is not a coloured nationalist movement at all. It's a fairness movement. Because we feel, as so-called coloured people, it's a term I reject, but I'm going to use it loosely, that we are being overlooked left, right and centre, which is not the topic of today.
By whom? By whom?
By government, all spheres of government.
And is that a black government?
And the white one that rules the city of Cape Town, or the Western Cape. So as far as coloured nationalism is concerned, I struggle with the term because I still don't know what it is.
But what is your sense? I mean, if you look, for instance, at the spatial planning in Cape Town today, let's look at a township like Mitchell's Plain, for instance. You know, created as a slum to throw people in. It's arguably the roads a bit wider than if you were to compare it to a Nova Park, but those were areas that were created by the apartheid government, maintained till this day. Communities have sprung up. Do you feel that where those communities are situated today, that certain action needs to be taken in terms of the delivery of services that would give you the impression that coloured people aren't being overlooked?
Well, if I didn't feel that way, then there would be something really wrong with me. You must remember that Mitchell's Plain is a dormitory. It was created to be just that. And it's still maintained to be just that. Let me give you an example of how apartheid is still practiced out there. You take into account that Stellenbosch is a municipality. Look at Mitchell's Plain. Look at the output. Look at the contribution to the Western Cape GDP. It's 13 times bigger than what Stellenbosch contributes. But it's still not a municipality. Us, the people of Mitchell's Plain, I live in Mitchell's Plain, still have to stand like that to the city, to the white-owned city of Cape Town, for any services, for any funds, for anything. Now look at how the white enclaves are served and serviced. There's clearly something wrong with the people of Mitchell's Plain in the eyes of this government.
Why would you say it's a white government? I struggle sometimes, with these descriptions because A, there's a supposedly coloured mayor, which is Dan Plato. B, we just came from an election recently to which, people in your constituency and others would have voted for these representatives. So how divorced, would those people be from the issues that you raise?
Okay, I'm going to tell it to you like this. I think that the so-called coloured people are still, for the most part, I'm going to hate myself and I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, entrenched in the apartheid mentality. We need to keep the cow out, which is wrong. We don't vote for the DA. We vote against the ANC. Look at how the DA plays the election game. They go with keep the ANC out. What do they mean by keep the ANC out? I mean, I'm a pro-ANC, you know this. They mean keep the blacks out. So my people, I use that term loosely as well, they vote for against that black fear that the blacks are going to come and take our houses, take our daughters, take our land, take our jobs. This is why they vote DA. More coloured people vote for the DA than white people. I mean, that's a fact. Dan Plato is not the mayor of the city of Cape Town. The mayor of the city of Cape Town, his name is Ian Nielsen. 4 terms as the deputy mayor. He's never put his name up to be the mayor of Cape Town because he's not interested, because it's a stupid position which means nothing. He's the power behind the throne. Dan Plato is nothing more than a porch monkey. Those are the facts.
Chumani, do you agree that, given the voting patterns that we sit with, that, the politically elected leadership in the city of Cape Town, in the Western Cape, that those voting patterns are informed by a sort of swart gevaar, black fear that voters demonstrate when they go and vote?
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that. The idea of the skin pigmentation politics, if we are to use that as a skin pigmentation, I'm more colored than him.
That's true.
If you want to use the skin pigmentation, but if you take him and take Sizwe Mpofu,
Yes.
Sizwe is more colored than him.
Yeah.
Sizwe can say he's black.
If I may.
You see?
Do you
Now-
want to guess what my
now-
nickname is?
Now, what I'm saying is that if you are to use the skin pigmentation thing, but you will remember that even Professor Naval Alexander,
Yes.
we totally disagree with him, because Professor Naval Alexander said to us that we must move away from the apartheid terminology, colored, black, and so on. Okay, and Professor Alexandra is more colored than him if we are used to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, but if you move away from the ideology of coloredness and use the Africans as the African people, all of us, we are then moving towards Steve Biko, the notion of black consciousness. Okay, that all of us, we were divided by apartheid project. Okay, and therefore you would then say, look, what is the problem with us? The problem is that we're oppressed, all of us. Okay? What do we do about that?
But
Is to organize politically.
I hear the ideological argument. It's a very sound argument. But, previously Gatvol has raised concerns around, somebody from the Eastern Cape, for instance, that's black in this instance, that is more eligible for resources when they come to the Western Cape. And so when you then see a battle for resources, be it land, be it housing, be it water and sanitation, that appears to take a color line. And I'd like to bring you here in, Fadiel. Is that the case? When there is the delivery of resources by a government, that is their consideration for a particular color. Let's just be frank about it. Is that the case?
I've been saying that for the last, 18 months. That when in the battle for resources in this particular province, the colored child will always finish third. There's no argument about that. I don't think my good friend right here is going to argue with me. It is what it is, and we're not happy with this. I would like to cut in. To those that don't know, when the government defined us as colored, it had very little to do with skin culture, with skin texture. Pigmentation wasn't really the factor. I mean, yes, they use the pencil test and that type of thing, but I've got cousins, blonde-haired, green-eyed cousins. I'm colored. I'm the darkest member of my family. My nickname is Kaffa. Seriously. I've got friends in my community that look more Xhosa than most Xhosas I know. The colored thing is more a linguistic thing. It's a cultural thing. It's the way we talk. You could be more colored than I am based on skin culture. But when you can tell me, my bro, laat sit no, in the same way I just did it, then you'd be more colored than I was.
But I want to come back to.
Let's go back.
I hear you. I hear you. But let's come back to the issue of resources. Is there, through the delivery of those resources, a consideration for race and who's eligible for those resources?
I just sent out a Facebook post this morning for, I think it was cameraman or trainee film producers or something. And the ad explicitly asked for black African in particular, which I find offensive as a born Captonian in a province where my people are just under 50% and used to be 62. I mean, how can that be a requirement here? How does that make any sense? What are you telling us when you and I had this debate before with the Department of Labor issue? With the Department of Labor, the custodian of the Labor Relations Act employs black Africans only. When it comes to the housing issue here, we are having a fight with the city of Cape Town now, where they only house, well not only, but it's an 80-20 split in favor of black. What is this telling us? I mean, why are we even asking this question that government in particular and business is catering? When we look at the bottom end of the market, and when I say the bottom end of the market, I mean the poor to black Africans in particular. And in most cases for people from the Eastern Cape, which is hurting those of us that actually live here.
But how real is that? You know, is that I've been hearing for some time, people from the Eastern Cape come, and these are particularly black African people come, they want to settle on a piece of land. I mean, look at Mitchell's Plain, for instance, where you come from, and I think it's the Sitalo informal settlement, where similar sentiments have been raised. Is this, I mean, are we talking about a few people here, or are you talking about en masse? Because if it's really a few people, then aren't you clutching at straws?
If I was to be able to quantify this, which I can't, let me put it to you like this. Sikwalo is but one squatter camp. It is estimated that there were between 3,000 and 4,000 shacks up there. It went up overnight. Swartklip Road on the other extreme of Mitchell's Plain, 7,000 shacks went up in the space of 3 weeks. So it's not just, we've never had a problem welcoming people to this province. Never. But this is becoming a serious problem. Us being so welcoming is becoming a serious problem because Sikwalo's people have now been promised houses by the city of Cape Town. What are they saying to our backyarders? What are they saying to our people living in squatter camps? That we're never going to get access to state housing, ever.
But what does it have to do with the race? Is there a race factor here?
Of course there's a race factor there. Look at the residents of Sikwalo. It's 100% black.
See, let me enter here. I think this is a bit technical question. You see, if you look at the pattern of government, how do their approach to respond on the need of the people? Here, poor people who have forced themselves to live in a squatter camp. That our government is not a proactive government; it's a reactive government. If you build a squatter camp in a damp place that has water, and then you build there, and of course, politically, that is seen as a risk, and it's an agent factor. It might happen that people who then go and occupy a particular piece of land, it's African people who happen to be speaking Xhosa, who happen to come from Eastern Cape. They might come from KwaZulu-Natal, they might come from Northern Cape and so on. Others were born here. I mean, even the notion that people historically, people who live in the Western Cape, it's African people, both black and colored. I mean, you've got Guguletu and Chip, the historiography. They're there, they've been there, they're born there. Now, what is very important for me, I think it's about the people who have occupied a piece of land. A lot of them is African people, a lot of them coming from somewhere else. But when government assess that, they see that this is a risk factor, these people must be provided houses. The reason why the so-called colored people are not there, but if you look at Mitchell's Plain, it's as much as it's a bad condition. People are thrown like Kailisha, people are thrown there, but people there are living in houses. Now, young people or poor people in Mitchell's Plain, they're coming from families who have old apartheid houses. Ne? Instead of going and occupy houses in what we call risk areas, they rather be at the backyard in their family houses with structures. But these ones, instead, because they have no homes, they have no place to live at the backyard. Some of them, they live in Guguletu, they stay the same pattern with Mitchell's Plain people, and they decide. But there are people here who are coming from outside the province who go and live in the risk areas. And then government, because it's a reactive government, goes to those people and said, okay, now that you are living here in a damp area, we will build houses for you. Now, I agree with him. That might appear a provision to African people who happen to speak Xhosa or come from Eastern Cape who are given houses because of the reactory approach of government. Now, what we then can say and do is to say, look, we've got 3 generations or 4 generations living in Mitchell's Plain. These young people are out of those generations. They were born in Mitchell's Plain in families with houses. But now they're adult. We're living in the backyard.
Is your solution then that those people must go to a wetland or somewhere, go and occupy and put up shacks for them to be taken note of?
Not at all.
Before we go there,
Wait, not at all.
Oh, is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying therefore that the government must not be reactive to people who go to wetland.
Yes.
to wetland in order to build houses for
And
people.
where else must they get involved?
But government must say, look, they must have a plan. To
Yes.
say, like, we've got young black people who are growing up in Mitchell's Plain,
Yeah.
who want to live, who want to go out of their family houses. Now, let's have a plan to take those young people and build them houses in close to the city. That's why we speak of social housing.
Okay.
Government must actively say, look, we will
And-
take
and-
Mitchell's Plain youth to Woodstock,
Sure.
to Mitchell's Plain, to Sea Point, part of the social houses.
Okay,
And then from
I'm
there.
going to come back to that. I know, Fadiel, you have some steam to blow. I'm going to come back.
No,
to
I've got no
just
steam to blow. I just want
We're
to
going to
go for it.
We'll
Go
go
for
for a
it.
break quickly. I will continue a democracy in action in a short while. Stay with us.
There has been so many incidents of people acting out racism, and one of those cases is the case of a South African estate agent, Vicky Momberg, who was caught on video verbally abusing a black policeman. She used the K word repeatedly. The state brought a case of crime and injury against Momberg, and a court had sentenced her to 3 years in jail. This makes her the first person in the country to be jailed for this offense. And the man who filmed himself using the K word while on holiday, and not forgetting a more recent event that occurred to MP Phumzile Van Dam when she was hit with hate speech about her race. These are just few of many more racial incidents that take place in the country.
Welcome back to Democracy in Action. We're talking about race, nationalism, and everything in between. In this last segment of the program, albeit that it's a very complex program and subject for one program, but we're going to be talking about the Adam Katsavelos, the pennies that says all manner of abhorrent things, and whether through legislation there are ways to try and stop and break down these descriptions and examples of racism. So we'll get there in a short bit. We at this time talking about resources, which Fadil, you wanted to jump in. The allocation of those resources based on color, or appears to be on color, and Chumani's more broad reasoning here that perhaps it's a bit technical, but the approach should be a bit more broader, and social housing would be that answer. What do you have to say?
I get Chumani's reasoning, and I'm not going to argue with it. People occupy on wetland, there's a health risk, there's the risk of landslides, or whatever the case might be, people get hurt out there. Here's my problem with all of this. A, the squatters are targeting wetland. Look at Swartklip Road, the Volwegat Nature Reserve. They're targeting these areas because they know once they're there, government has to respond. But now look at what happens when colored people do it. I was part of the Woodlands land invasion, right? I was a big part of that.
And
we got shot.
In Parkwood, right?
Parkwood, we got shot. Hermanus, we got shot. And when I say we, it's because I was present and part of it. Now, when colored people attempt to take a piece of land, this is the response of the state. Live ammunition, rubber bullets, and tear gas. Mass arrests. This is what they do. My brother and 7 others have been on trial for more than a year now for the Sikwalo protest, for the reaction to the Sikwalo protest. Now, I'm going to put it to you like this. 46 people of Sikwalo were arrested for initiating those processes, for stoning our cars and our houses, for burning our stores, for burning the greengrocer, local greengrocer. People were arrested and released the next day. When the colored people reacted to it, they're still on trial. Do you see the disparity? How the state clamps down when we assert our rights, and how the state just looks the other way, just like that, when it happens to be because our speaking people. This is our fight. Because remember, we fought here in the Western Cape. I think most of you here would be too young to remember this. Side by side with our brothers from Langa, from Guguletu, from Kailicha. There is a rational argument to be made that the colored people were privileged under apartheid. You can't run away from it. We got houses, you all got shanties. We got jobs, you were designed in the eyes of Verwoerd and Co. to do the menial work, to push the wheelbarrow, to dig the holes. That was wrong. We gave up those privileges in solidarity with our black brothers. I was but a young boy. I was present in town. I was tear gassed and shot in town for my right to be his equal, only for the state to turn around and say, whoa, 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 you're not black African in particular. That is what we find hurtful. That is what we find that brings the resentment to the fore from areas like Mitchell's Plain, like Parkwood. Because when we say our flats are overcrowded, this is apartheid spatial planning. This flat was given to a family of 4. There's now 35 of us in here. We've got couples sleeping in bathrooms, families sleeping on staircases. Let's take this piece of land. What does this government do to us? They brutalize us. But let our brothers and sisters from the Eastern Cape come. Grab a piece of land. The state will stand by and watch. Why? Anybody.
But that is not equally true. The who gets shot, who does not get shot. I mean, fundamentally, I mean, with evidence. Everyone who occupies land, this happened not only in Western Cape, in Alexandra. People were shot. People's houses were demolished. All the people in Squatter Camp who build houses, whether in wetland or whatever, where the city deems it, the first response is rubber bullets, tear gas, to everyone, not just only to colored people, to everyone. But people have been resisting. For example, now, if you go to Philippi, there's been widespread protest in Philippi throughout the year last year. But today, people, they're staying, the city decide to leave them. They're there now, okay? Now, I'm saying it's not just colored people who are targeted by the state, but it's all poor people. Poor people are targeted. Let's not racialize this thing, but no, who's get targeted? But the truth speaks that all people who are poor, they get targeted. I agree. Now, it so happened to be colored people at that point in time, but everyone get targeted by the state. I agree. But for me, I'm saying this is a structural problem. Part of which is to say, how do you have, for example, take young people from Mitchell's Plain. How do we stop this thing? As young people, we propose that there must be a clear agenda. Hence, we had the free education protest and the struggle. That young people in Mitchell's Plain, in Hanover Park, in Miningburg, supposed to be the majority at UCT. They're not majority. Young people supposed to be the majority in Stellenbosch. They're not the majority. You see, now, that is the future struggle of taking those young people out of there's no one, at least for me, I lived in Delft. I told my friends and told my family there that I will never live in Delft again. Because I don't want a state house. I said that I don't want, I was still in high school. I said I don't want a state house. Now, we want that kind of attitude from young people in Miningburg, Hanover Park, to say, I don't want state house. The only thing I want my own house through education. This is a kind of a revolution that we want to build, that young people must reject state houses. Young people must go and seek to get a degree in Stellenbosch University. Stellenbosch University, to use his language, must be occupied by colored people in majority, because they are in majority in the Western Cape. Young people must occupy UCT. Colored people must be in majority there. There's no question about that. That is a struggle of young people. Yes, if you've got people who say, look, I can no longer go to school, I'm 40 years old, what must I do? I believe our people must be given dignity. Part of that dignity must get jobs. Create jobs so that people don't wait from the state. They can build their own houses. This is an ongoing approach and struggle in terms of what needs to be done. Because if we're going to do this thing as be beggars, we were beggars during apartheid, and then we don't want our people to be beggars anymore. Hence, we are saying any young person under the age of 18 must have access to university degree, must have access to high school and colleges. That's what we are fighting for. So that tomorrow Mitchell's Plain become a city built by them, for their families, for their community. That's what we want. Not to racialize issues among black people. African people must be able to build this thing themselves. Yeah. That is the argument that we're making. You have young people there. So if you are driving now to Hanover Park or to Manning, young people are sitting on the street. The question is why? The intervention of the state must be that those young people are on the street because of the apartheid. That their parents were prevented to go to university. They are not doctors, they are not engineers. Now, the state must intervene to say the young kids must go to school so that they can take degrees. That's why fees must follow us there to make sure our people occupy. It is my challenge to my brother and the organization that is leading. He must lead that, but that organization must go to Stellenbosch University. That organization must go to UCT. and put it a point. We want 10% come 2020 of young people coming from mining back, from high school in mining back. 20% of those young people must go to UCT. It is a struggle that must be won by him and his fellows and leading us all. We will support that. He must go and make a commitment with the Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University that Stellenbosch University must take young. You have to identify how many high schools in Mitchell's Plain and Nova Park in Mining Back and get 10% to go to Stellenbosch.
I'm going to allow the interviewer to tell you who my fight is with right now.
Please.
Will you be so kind?
Well, the problem
I'm fighting UCT now
UCT.
for the lack of representation of colored kids. Because in this province,
Well, one of the things that I was going to come to now as a critique for what Chumani, because I think we broadly agree that should be.
I've got no argument with this man on that part.
But now the challenge that you've raised, and this is the fight that you're having, which I was going to come to now with UCT, is that and this is something that speaks to his broader issues, that there appears to be, when there is a selection criteria about access to these institutions, which is what he raised earlier, that he is not African black. And that appears to be the challenge. Is that the nature of your complaint?
Look, I'm going to put it to you like this. Is a young man, which I don't think I am anymore. A youngish man. Well, I was a young man then. I was black. In my heart, in my soul, in my mind, I was black. And my biggest disappointment in this country and in this democracy is that we still have that awful block that says colored, which disqualifies me and my children from receiving any state aid in any aspect. If my son was to apply for a bursary, he wouldn't get it. I mean, let me break it down. I run a feeding scheme out of my pocket. At one stage, I was going to apply for help from the Department of Social Development. And one of the questions on the questionnaire was, what is the percentage of black Africans that you feed? And I was disgusted because I'm not feeding color, I'm feeding hunger. And I live in Mitchell's Plain. Where am I supposed to find 60% representation of black Africans? I feed in Mitchell's Plain. I mean, if you were to live in Langa, you'd feed in Langa because it's close to your heart. So I just found it hurtful, man. I mean, these are the things that built up in me, my person, and brought me here.
Yeah.
The fact that whatever I do, color is an issue. And at the end of the day, I'm the one accused of racializing things. It just...
All right, we're running tight with time, and there's still at least two different elements of the discussion that I want to have, and I want to segue very quickly to look at the political response, because we can bicker about the application of who gets the resources and the ticking of a box and so on. Is there perhaps a real conversation to have about the political establishment of South Africa? And I'm not talking here ANC or EFF or DA. Is there, and does it necessitate, Chumani, I'd like to bring you in here as a political student as well, should we re-look our understanding both on the issue of race, but also how it speaks to, as you put it, the poor person, and that perhaps is a broader approach here to dealing with poverty, as opposed to looking at the color of the poverty?
Yeah, look, I suppose the political approach we have to imagine is a new one. As young black people in this country, we must be able to carry everyone else by coming up with new alternative of political understanding of what needs to be done. Remember, South Africa does not have a nationhood. Any country that needs to build a nationhood, it must be imagined. As the president talking about dreaming is right. People must dream. Part of dreaming is envisioning things, imagine things. Where are we going beyond this? And I can imagine, and I dream that of black people running this province totally, with a view of serving everyone else as a country. And I argue to say that we have a responsibility, me and him and others, to bring white people on board. White people are our counterparts. There's no question about that. We have to work with them. But remember that as Rolihlahla Mandela have done, was to liberate white people themselves, because they were in chain. And there's a big argument that, in fact, white people today have benefited more than they've benefited in apartheid. Now, I'm saying we have a responsibility
here's an
to build that towards that.
Here's an interesting, I just want to interject there. There was a recent poll done by the Institute for Race Relations, and I understand that, the reservation around this organization. But the findings of this poll suggest that in the last year to 2 years, that in fact white people are being discriminated against more and are the recipients of racism more than even black people. How do you respond to
Well, I mean, white people being discriminated, there's no way. How do you discriminate someone who owns means of production? There's no question about that. I mean, there's no white person can be discriminated at UCT. White people at UCT, they're happy. You see? Now, because you can't discriminate, you can't be racist if you are poor. Someone who can be racist is someone who's rich, affluent, who runs means of production. There's no white person can feel discriminated in Stellenbosch, even in artificial imagination of thinking. It's lie. That poll is a lie, because white people are still beneficiaries of the apartheid production. They still control means of production. They own big companies in this country. They own top companies in JSE. They're owned by them. There is no way. It's a lie. What we are saying is that white people, they know deep down that as the minority in this country, they are not supposed to have so much control over the economic production of our goods and services in this country. Yeah. But because of apartheid, they still have power to that.
Fadiel, are white people being discriminated against? Institute for Race Relations says they are.
Well, I'm going to put it to you like this, that all the points that my brother on my left has just raised are very valid, except the fact when you say that white people own the means of production, we're talking about maybe 5%. We're talking about the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers, and most white people, well, not most, a fair percentage of white people are a little bit more average than you and I. They live in a better suburb because of the past, but they're actually just ordinary Joes going about doing their work, trying to stay afloat. I'm not going to paint white people with the same brush. It's just not in me. I do think that the ordinary white kid from your lower middle class suburb, just passing matric, possibly not going to varsity, he struggle with a job. Yeah, I would say he's being discriminated against. The other.
But in what way? In what way?
Well, look. I mean, if you look at, he's going to apply for a job. Is he going to get it? Probably not. Why?
I mean, which white lower or poor white person? Which area?
Well, we're going to look at Reitewag.
Yeah,
we're going to look at Brooklyn. We're going to look at Lower Molliton. I mean, you can look at Goodwood, you can look at Parow. Parow was worse than Mitchell's Plain. I'd rather live in Mitchell's Plain than Parow, to be honest with you. But yeah, what I'm saying is that there are many white people that are feeling the grind, maybe not to the extent that you and I are, but they're not having an easy time in the New South Africa. And I genuinely think that a discussion needs to be had about where do these people fit in? As in, we need to have that discussion as to where do the colored people fit into the national question.
Sure, but do white people, they not suffer or... I mean, this is...
White people can never say that they face the same discrimination that you and I do. They can never say that.
But do they enjoy privilege? So you think a white person is more cleverer than
oh,
average
you're sick.
Black person?
Let me tell it to you like this. The white man, by the accident of his birth, is going to get better health services than you and I. He's going to be safer than you and I. He's going to go to a school where he's going to be better educated than you and I. Whether he's rich, whether he's regarding himself as poor, those are the facts. But what I'm saying is we can never use the blanket approach on an entire race. White people are rich. That's not quite true. That's what I'm saying. At Gatvol, we're all about moderation. Believe it or not. We're all about moderation. When I look at a white man, I do not see wealth. All I see is a white man.
What do you mean by moderation?
When we use the approach that white people own the means of production, let us be honest, man. It is 5 to 10% of them that own everything. That's the truth.
But that's the means of production.
Yes, but we're saying that white people as a whole. Do you think that the Ruperts are sharing what they have with the people in Reitewag and Parow and Brooklyn? No. Those people were beneficiaries.
So basically, it's Patrice Motsepe not sharing his wealth with the people in London.
And that is my big fight with this government. You know what my big fight is? We've created a handful of black billionaires, a few thousand black millionaires, and left the rest to rot.
But that is a culture of capitalism, okay? Even without race, if you want.
So is capitalism then defined by elements of race?
Yes, in South African context.
Yes.
But he wants us to move towards a non-racial posture where we say we have to look at the classic capitalist posture that if you are rich, irrespective of your race, you just don't care about the poor. I'm happy with that. Okay? But we have a responsibility to say, look, if we're gonna take that posture to say, look, if you are rich, you are our enemy as a poor people. That's fine. Okay? You can say, look, there are white people who are poor, that's okay. But my approach is that is to say, look, if there are white people who are poor,
I got to hear this.
welcome.
Oh, okay.
Welcome to 300 years of lived reality of African people. Okay? I have no issue with them. Welcome, experience what it means to be humans. Now, what I'm saying, therefore, that we, as African people in this country, all of us, we have to rally together with those poor white people and say, how do we put equality in our livelihood as a people in this country as well as in Africa? They must come back and be normal. And normalizing whiteness, it means normalizing the lives of people. If they are willing to join us and to occupy Camps Bay, to occupy Constantia, all those open spaces, apparently open spaces in Pinelands, they are kept for the birds and the dogs to do walking around. But no, man. We need houses there. We don't need birds to be walking around, to be flying all over in an open space in Constantia. Now, for me, I'm saying, my brother, it's fine. Welcome white people who are poor. Let's go and occupy Constantia and live comfortably there. But to just the last point, our responsibility as young people is to really build a nationhood in this country, beyond race. Therefore, is to say, look, how do we...
But is a nationhood possible for a place like South Africa? Look, for instance, to America at this moment. More polarized than it has ever been. A country that is built on, different nationalities that have come together. As history would teach us that, it was the Indians that came and were the founders of that land. Yet we saw slavery take shape and take ownership of America to the point today where it's very difficult to point out what the true American spirit or true American person really is. Is that the inevitable trajectory of a place like South Africa, that we are going to confront a scenario at some stage where the bubble is going to burst, where though there may be some confluence in what the two of you are saying, a few years from now, you guys are going to be fighting with each other.
Don't you think,
purely based on the issues of race?
Don't you think we're already there?
How?
We're already at that point. Not the fighting, where we don't know what the real history of the country is. This is Cape Town. We had a Percy Utah Street until a few years ago. Van Riebeeck is still up. Roads fell now the other day. Where's Ashley Creel Boulevard? Where is the monument to Kretoa? To Harry Strandloper? I've got Sebukwe, I've got Tutu, I've got Mandela. Can you see how we're being painted out of history here? Us, the original owners of this land. Remember that even the United Nations identifies the colored people as the descendants of the Khoi and the Sun. My brother brought up the Constantia issue now. My family's from Constantia. I can tell you when Constantia is expropriated without compensation, I'll tell you who's going to get the land. The people from the Eastern Cape. We will stay in the backyards where we are. This is what's going to happen. This is the government's agenda. This is what we're fighting. What is the true history of this country? Tell the true history of this country.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the man that saw the roads falling from the UCT, so you're going to have to take that fight up with him. I want to, as we round up the discussion, quickly look at, and I deliberately did not want to have this conversation purely just looking at these individuals that make very pure stock racist comments, but let's deal with them very quickly. Vicky Momberg, Adam Katsavelos, these are individuals that, were very racist and vile in how they revealed themselves. How do we deal with that? Because in the case of people like Penny, crime and injury she was charged with, it was the first case in the world where racism saw her being criminally held liable. How do we deal with such stock racism?
I'm very disappointed in you because you didn't add Steve Hofmeyer to that list.
I can add it to the list. How do we deal with it?
That's a hard one. Because I believe that jail time is what's needed as a deterrent. But, they've got to come out of prison at some stage. And they're going to come out with the same attitude. I think education is needed. I think some type of deterrent is needed. I don't think I'm smart enough to answer that question.
It's
You
a
want to handle this
difficult
one?
Well, I suppose you see what we have here is it's. I don't think jail and legislation. You can't legislate behavior of people. It's an attitude.
We do it all the time.
It's an attitude that look, I hate you, and I have a power over you. Then, the racism of South Africa, it's always been a structural racism. It's about power. The only way you can make white people realize that they're equal to black people is to make sure that Constantia does not remain as it is now. Constantia was as it is now during apartheid. It is. Now, for me to say, take that power away from them in order for them to realize that they have no power over black people. Take the power of ownership of means of production away from them. That's the best deterrent. Because remember, racism is employed by someone who think they are superior based on material possession over other people. Now, whether white people, they say I'm a kafir or not, but there is ways in which they remind me I'm a kafir. Part of that, they employ me. They employ my brother. Now, when someone employs you, psychologically is telling you, fuck off. You are a kafir.
I don't think we have to say that.
No, but then what I'm trying to say is that the only way, it's not the only way to tell someone that you disgust me by calling me a kafir. There's many other ways. Part of those ways is to employ black people as and when they want. If now you go to the farms, our brothers and sisters every day are called kafirs, both in words as well as in action.
But how do we deal with Steve Hofmeyer?
Steve Hofmeyer, again, is a question of power.
Don't buy CD.
You see, the thing is that you discover the likes of Steve Hofmeyer. They've got ownership, for example, in Absa Bank, in Standard Bank. You use Standard Bank, I use Standard Bank, you use Standard Bank. Now, the only way to stop that is to identify where does Steve Hofmeyer get power? Who supports Steve
So cut
Hofmeyer?
him off by the legs.
Now, we have to understand that. Up until we get the roots of who supports Steve Hofmeyer to say the thing that he's saying. Wait up until Steve Hofmeyer stays in Kailicha. He will be mum. Because he's poor. Now, the only way he's speaking so much is because he has a direct contact into
We have to go. We have to go. Very quickly, how do we deal with racism in 20 seconds?
We have to allow it to die. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't legislate it, like my brother said.
Yeah.
We have to tackle all forms of racism. I've been called ugly names by whites and blacks already. Let's not forget that. I hear the K word in my community 20 times a day. Racism does not only come from one shade. We must not run away from that.
Okay.
And I'll leave it right there.
And that's a wrap for our conversation. Clearly a very colorful one, pun intended. And let's hope that we can continue this conversation at some time. Thank you so very much for having tuned in. Until we talk again, a very good evening.